for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But even today, there are those who claim that believing in man's one small step requires one giant leap of faith. Bill Casing was an analyst and engineer at Rocketdyne, the company that designed the Apollo rockets.
There were many problems that evolved during the 60s that led people to believe that we're never going to make it to the moon.
Three decades ago, when the world watched Apollo's lunar landings, Bill Casing was watching too. But what he saw on television, combined with his experiences at Rocketdyne, made him a skeptic.
The whole thing then seemed phony to me. I think it was an intuitive feeling that what was being shown was not real.
As he studied the footage more closely, he was shocked to find several inconsistencies. Casing observed that despite the clarity of deep space, the stars were missing from the black lunar sky. He saw the American flag waving, even though there is no air on the moon. And he discovered that there was no blast crater beneath the lunar lander, where its powerful rocket engine had fired. This evidence convinced Casing that we never sent a man to the moon. But NASA dismisses these charges.
There are always going to be people who believe some outlandish theories, and the notion that we somehow were able to fake the lunar missions is pretty outlandish.
As outlandish as it might seem, it has been estimated that as many as 20% of Americans believe we never went to the moon. But how could anyone think that one of the greatest moments in human history is a hoax? Is it really possible that NASA deceived the world? According to a former astronaut, it's entirely possible.
Regarding the Apollo mission, I can't say 100% for sure whether these men walked on the moon.
Brian O'Leary was a NASA astronaut in the 1960s and served as a science advisor during the Apollo moon missions.
It's possible that NASA could have covered it up just in order to cut corners and to be the first to allegedly go to the moon.
This theory inspired the 1978 movie Capricorn 1, in which the government attempts to fool the world by faking a mission to Mars.
We do not claim this planet in the name of America. We claim it in the name of all the people of the planet Earth.
The Apollo footage is strikingly similar to the scenes in Capricorn 1. Producer Paul Lazarus suggests that the film's plotline could be more fact than fiction.
I believe, had they wanted to, that NASA could indeed have pulled off the greatest hoax of all time, never sent anyone to the moon, and recreated it in a television studio. And I believe it could have been done at that time. The technology was in place.
The footing is solid. The surface seems powdery.
Surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe.
What we put up on the screen was our own simulated version of whatever we could do within a $4 million aid budget.
But with NASA's $40 billion budget, Casing believes they had the resources to pull off a hoax if they couldn't make it to the moon.
The reason I believe that NASA and the government faked the moon landing was basically it was technically impossible to do it. And they simply had to come up with some sort of alternative that they felt the public would believe.
Is this evidence that the footage is actually fake? A sequence shot in a controlled environment here on Earth? Just months before this historic landing, a prototype LEM was flight tested at Ellington Air Force Base. While NASA cameras record the test flight, Neil Armstrong struggles to control the unwieldy craft. Then, at approximately 300 feet, the lander flies wildly out of control. At the last second, Armstrong ejects. And floats to safety. If the lander was so unstable and difficult to fly in the controlled environment of Earth, then how could the LEM land 6 times flawlessly in the alien environment of the moon?
The LEM had a single engine mounted dead center, and then they had little push jets, thruster jets, a couple of them up on top. This was supposed to control their attitude as they came down. Well, I'll tell you a secret. The instant you moved your tail in that cabin an inch, you would change the load pattern, it would begin to tilt, and it would start that thing spinning.
The fact that there's no blast crater under the LEM is one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that I find supporting the hoax.
In fact, no sign of a blast crater is visible for any of the 6 lunar landings. But LEM specialist Paul Fiel says he can explain why the lunar module left no crater when landing on the moon.
The amount of thrust that you need coming out of the bottom of the descent engine is about 1,500, 2,000 pounds of thrust. And all that does is just push dust away. There's no burning or anything like that.
Yet NASA's own scientific illustrations clearly depict a blast crater.
Then there's one other point. If they had truly landed on the moon, this dust would have then descended on the lunar lander, on the foot pads, and we find not a trace of dust on the foot pads. When I discovered that alone, I said, no way am I looking at a lunar lander that landed on the moon.
Could it be that the LEM was just a prop on a giant lunar movie set?
When Armstrong said, that's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, the footprint that he made could have easily been made in Area 51.
Casing points out that the LEM's departure from the lunar surface is even more suspicious.
In the footage of the ascent stage going up, what you don't see is an exhaust plume coming out of the rocket engine nozzle.
What a ride, what a ride.
But what do we see? We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
Is this evidence of a conspiracy? Was the government capable of such a massive cover-up?
To propose that this was all faked and a hoax, they have to say that every piece of evidence, that every physical scientific test that one could offer to support the reality of the lunar landings, they have to say that all of those are fake.
I would say that my conviction that Apollo was a fake was really not according to one specific piece of evidence, but it was cumulative. This whole thing was a fake.
You really like it, don't you? You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
I mean, do you have Neil Armstrong interviewed already?
No, he doesn't want to be interviewed.
Well, I know.
Why does he not give interviews?
Well, because that's his personal choice. And I guess it's mine, in a way, to do things when they've been researched and worked out as far as a business arrangement. This is not news. This is not an anniversary.
Well, actually it is. We found a very unique reel of footage that we have queued up to show you.
Yeah.
And it's from the mission. And to our knowledge, no one has ever seen it before.
Mm.
And it's 30 years old.
And you want me to see this while you have me on camera?
Well, and to tell us what it is. I mean, it's...
Well, I don't know why I should do that.
It's a very unique
Well,
footage.
it may be that I need to see it, and then we sit down and we talk about what you're taking a picture of. I don't see where there's an advantage in it for me to do what you're asking me to do. I see all sorts of pitfalls. I see people who have managed to talk to somebody. Who did you talk to in our office?
I talked with Heather at Tor Books.
Yeah, but is this helping book promotion? Are you going to be putting anything out during the time that I'm marketing books? See, Heather does not represent me for the things you're talking about. She represents a book selling activity.
I think when you see the footage, you'll see that it's
Well,
very extraordinary, one of a kind,
Okay.
behind the scenes type
Yeah.
of footage.
Yeah. Well, if it is, why do you have access to something that no one else has seen before?
Serendipity, I guess. And it was recorded on the 18th
Of what?
of July, 1969.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Do you remember this?
On the 18th?
Sure. Okay, Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Sure. Okay, Roger, Roger, Neil, we just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're seeing. Thank you very much. Well, we shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light. We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera. South America becomes invisible just off beyond the terminator or inside the shadow. We can see the oceans with a definite blue cast, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth. Roger, the ATC's working real well. The F-22 looks good, over. Hello, Apollo 11, Houston, did you copy, over? Roger, you copied, Charlie. Roger, your transmissions the last couple of times have been about 2 by, over. Okay, how do you read me now? Right, you're 5 by now. Coastline. Now we're coming in. Can't quite make out who that is.
What is your proposition? That we didn't go to the moon?
I know for a fact that you did. I know for a fact that you did not.
You know for a fact that we did not.
That's correct, and you'll see this tape proves that.
Okay, well, I'm not interested in satisfying your suppositions when there's all this evidence that we did.
This proves, as you see, that you were using the window to demonstrate that you were halfway to the moon when you were
Turn the
doing an
camera off,
illusion with
please.
the window.
Turn the camera off.
Through the other windows.
You're full of shit.
It shows that you're in Earth orbit. Now, if the moon is 3 days away, and this is late, on the 18th, how could you possibly walk on the moon 2 days later when this was shot on the 18th?
You want me to sit in front of a camera while you're taking pictures, you're showing this, and then you want to see my reaction?
I know for a fact that you
That's
didn't.
slimy journalism. Do you realize that?
If
You ought to be ashamed of
If you read the
yourself.
document that I have in here, you'll find that it's not. That this is a personal plea to do what is right.
Well, we sit and we talk about things ahead of
This is the
time.
document that you'll want to see.
Place the camera at the back of the spacecraft.
I know for a fact
But
that
what it is you're trying to do is unethical. You don't believe that?
It is completely
No, I do not.
with the Earth
Well,
in low
then we have a difference of opinion.
The circumference of the window.
This is where you're using the window on the spacecraft to appear to be the Earth far
With the
away.
darkened walls of the
We got the raw footage of it. We have an auxiliary track, someone prompting you when
That
to
is why
speak.
they wanted the interior.
You believe in UFOs?
No, I
You
do
believe
not.
we've been visited by... Well, why do
No, I
you want to
don't.
believe this stuff?
I know for a fact. We've had this analyzed, and this is the window, and and it's dated by an atomic clock at the Goldstone tracking station, which is on the tape.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight. We're not...
I know for a fact that it did. And this tape would prove it in a court of law.
Subsequently, this
It would.
tape was never used.
Why don't you try? Why don't you put your money into a court of law and see how people laugh at you? You want it...
No one has
Is your
laughed.
camera working?
No one has laughed.
And this makes you the real famous person that has discovered this and reveals all this stuff. What an ego you must have to want to propel yourself like this.
That's not why I'm doing it, and God knows that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the truth to come out because I think it was wrong.
You can also notice how the
No,
astronaut
but you're doing it the wrong way. You don't mislead somebody like me to come in here.
If you didn't go to the moon, that's misleading people.
If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
What was the temperature like in the spacecraft on the moon?
Well, the lunar module that was the vehicle that we landed on the moon, it was just like this room we're sitting in here right now. We had a thermostat, and it worked a little different than the air conditioning in a house or a building. However, it had the same effect. So if it was too hot, we moved it up a little cooler, and so we could get just the right temperature we wanted. Now, when we put on our spacesuits and closed them up, then we had a backpack on, and in that back was essentially an air conditioner too, a different kind, a kind that would work in a vacuum, and then we could keep our suits the right temperature, because human beings, even though we've got a lot of good capabilities, you know, our brains are amazing, our eyes are amazing, we don't perform well if we're not within a really narrow temperature band. If we get too hot, we sweat, we don't do well. If we get too cold, we shiver and we don't do well. So it's important for human beings to have temperature control, and of course we do that on Earth real well.
Any ill effects from the Van Allen radiation belts?
No, now I'm not sure we went far enough out to encounter the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe we did.
Beginning at an altitude of 1,000 miles and extending an additional 25,000 miles, lay lethal bands of radiation called the Van Allen radiation belts. Every space mission in history with humans on board, from both the United States and Soviet Union, from the first in 1961 to the present, has been well below this deadly radiation field. Mercury, Gemini, Soyuz, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, all maintained altitudes well below 1,000 miles. All except Apollo.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And then we build it that way.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
Then we went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
We didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
In 1998, the Space Shuttle flew to an altitude of 350 miles, one of its highest altitudes ever, hundreds of miles below the beginning of a field of radiation that was so severe that the astronauts inside of their shielded spacecraft and inside of their shielded spacesuits saw flashes of light with their eyes shut that they described as shooting stars, due to radiation penetrating first the shuttle's shielding, then their spacesuit shielding, then their skulls, and finally the retinas of their closed eyes. As a result, CNN issued the following report noting NASA's unpredicted surprise. The radiation belt surrounding Earth may be more dangerous for spacewalking astronauts than previously believed. Scientists say the phenomena known as the Van Allen belts can spawn killer electrons when the Earth's magnetic field changes. These electrons that are being studied could have an important effect not only on satellites, which has happened in the past, but could also affect the astronauts by creating large doses of radiation that could influence their health. The electrons can penetrate through various materials, including spacesuits, and can pass through, in fact, the walls of the space station, and can create high charges deep inside of these objects.
No strange occurrences?
Nothing like that.
The space shuttle...
Go ahead.
The space shuttle went to 365 miles a few years ago. Because I worked in news. I saw CNN. They said that the radiation belts surrounding Earth are more dangerous than previously believed because the astronauts saw shooting stars with their eyes closed just when they got within 600.
Radiation belt. We saw shooting stars, but they're not shooting stars from with your eyes closed, although they look like it. If you're out in space beyond the Van Allen belt, and probably within the Van Allen belt, and close your eyes and just pay attention. You don't notice it unless you pay attention. Then all of a sudden you'll see a little flash like a shooting star, except it's like that. There goes one this way. Then one just blossoms. And then not that fast. Maybe you wait 3 minutes or 2 minutes and one goes whoosh. And what's happening is cosmic rays are hitting the back of your eye and exciting those sensors in the back of your eye. So that's what you see. And they got high enough apparently to close it. My guess is in Earth orbit, if you closed your eyes and just paid attention, that you would see them.
The first time they were seen was when they went to 365 miles.
Yes.
That's 650 miles below or away from the radiation.
Yeah, see, it's below. My guess if they just did it tonight. But see, if you're just going to sleep or closing your eyes or it's dark, you don't notice them. But if you'll close your eyes and pay attention, which we had an experiment to do, by the way, then you see them whistling by. Not on our mission, by the way, they hadn't been discovered yet. I saw them one day on the moon. It wasn't dark, and it was kind of dark, and I saw this flash of light, and it looked like it was on the moon, but really it wasn't. It was a flash of light in my eye.
I got to a point on my 2 flights to the moon, particularly my last flight when I actually made the moon my home for over 3 days. You know, you become detached from one planet. You become detached from Earth, which is your identity with reality. But we launched at night, circled the Earth about 1.5 times, and headed out to the moon for a 3-day voyage when we got there.
So the engine is loud?
You get, pardon?
Is the engine loud as you're descending?
Well, the engine is very loud. It's very difficult to tell the difference between feeling sound and hearing sound, but yes, it's loud.
When you were in it, you couldn't hear it in the vacuum of space.
It's a very kinetic, very dynamic period of about 10 to 12 minutes. And you get down to 200 feet, and you go through an area where you're either going to land or you're basically going to crash.
So is the Earth, I guess, is 6 times bigger than the moon is from Earth?
The Earth is about 4 times bigger than a full moon looks to us from Earth. It was very close to the horizon on Apollo 17, and that was unique for us. We didn't have to look up like most of the other flights from most of the other landing sites were to look at the Earth. I mean, I just glanced over my shoulder, and there's the Earth. It was there all the time. It was so prominent. It was almost involuntarily while you're going about your work and being a lunar geologist and exploring and driving a rover, you'd always be confronted by the Earth itself. It was, I tell you what, it was almost like a security blanket. Because you knew it was there. It was the warmth that accompanied your visit to another planet.
So there was no strange phenomenon going through the belts of any kind. Nothing happened.
There was no great unknowns, no science fiction going to the moon. It was all science fact. Although sometimes it seemed like it was science fiction.
I saw a CNN report about 3 years ago. The space shuttle went to about 365 miles. And that was the closest they got to the belts since the moon missions went through them. And they were about, I guess, 650 miles away from the belts. And they reported that it was more dangerous than previously believed, and that when they were 650 miles away, inside a shielding better than you guys used, they could see the radiation with their eyes closed going through their skulls and the retinas of their closed eyes.
Well, I don't know about the shuttle. The shuttle doesn't have the capability to go very far, 400 miles. I don't know exactly where the Van Allen. Quiet. Hey. 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 Quiet. You know, the shuttle doesn't have the capability to fly very far away from Earth, maybe 300-400 miles. I don't know exactly how far out the radiation Van Allen belt is. It didn't seem to bother us very much.
Did you see shooting stars?
Did
you see the shooting stars?
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of noise going on. So I don't know the results of some of the experiments they've conducted. The point is they can't get that far from here, and they're really in the protective confines of the Earth, outside the atmosphere certainly. Now on the way to the moon, we did conduct lots. We weren't passengers away to the moon.
We're passengers.
We conducted all kinds of experiments, and one of them was an experiment where we closed our eyes and then we put some light-sensitive pads on our eyes, and we could literally, yes, we could see traces of radiation or traces of something going through our eyes. We conducted this experiment both going to the moon and coming back from the moon several times. Now, what that all meant, I don't know, but it wasn't the kind of radiation that gave us a problem of any kind. But you could see it. You could close your eyes and you could see these things shoot by. We all saw it.
Not on our mission, by the way. They hadn't been discovered yet.
We did it on more than one mission.
I guess you knew von Braun, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They found a publication of his that he did prior to the goal being set to go to the moon. And in it he says, "It is commonly believed that man will fly directly from the Earth to the moon. But to do this, we would require a vehicle of such gigantic proportions that it would prove an economic impossibility. Calculations have been carefully worked out on the type of vehicle we would need for the nonstop flight from the Earth to the moon and to return. The figures speak for themselves. 3 rockets would be necessary. Each rocket ship would be taller than the Empire State Building, 1,250 feet, and weigh about 10 times the tonnage of the Queen Mary, or some 800,000 tons. Now, the Saturn V rocket weighed 2,500 tons. Now, that's a difference of 32,000%. How do you explain that change was made within a 3-year period?